Hello, this is RV Vagabond Jerry, and I'm at the Music House Museum, which is just a little ways north of Traverse City, Michigan. And this is a museum of self-player musical instruments, player pianos and organs. They have a violin, music boxes, all kinds of devices, self-player music, some that are well over 100 years old. So they give a guided tour here where the guide shows you how the instruments work and turn them on for you so you can listen to them. And then they have a little bit of a self-guided part of the museum. So come along with me and I'll take you on the tour here. And I think you'll really like it, so let's go in.
This one has a little brass basket that catches the coins when you put them in the coin slot. Has to be the oldest piece you're going to hear and see on the tour today. Kind of looks like a bread basket, but it's not. It's actually called an organette, or a roller organ, made by the American Organette Company in New York in 1884. Now, the family that donated this thing to us lived in the Chicago area. We contacted our curators if they would be willing to give this thing to us with the stipulation we send somebody down to home Chicago to pick it up. This was years and years ago, and gasoline was still under $1 a gallon, so our curator agreed. He drove down Chicago. And each hole leads down to a little brass reed, similar to what you find in an accordion or a harmonica. So in the holes of paper, line up to the holes in the track bar, the air gets sucked down through the hole, vibrates the reed, plays the note, and that's how this thing works. Now some of our tour guides like to throw this as a teenager effect door, and I'll show you why. This is a Milton. It was made in New York in 1922. With some of the foot pedals you have to pump to operate the bellows, create a vacuum behind the center tracker bar. Well, before, either you were pushing the keys down, but the external device was doing it. Now we have little pneumatics or bells on the inside that actually do all the work of picking the hammer up to hit the strings, so there's no real reason for these keys to move at all. Except Americans like to see how things work. So they put counterweights underneath all the keys. By the Weber Company in New York in 1925. This particular piano was especially made for Frederick and Sally Fisher of Fisher Body, which they become GM for the home in Detroit. Now in 1925, the average cost of a home in the United States was about $2,000. That gets a nice 4-bedroom bungalow someplace. The Fishers reportedly paid over $10,000 for this piano. It's the equivalent of 5 homes sitting in their parlor. Now this case is all American walnut. It was all hand carved with gold overlay on it. That is the only part expense of this piano, because the pneumatics in this piano, instead of just playing a note back in that 1 note intensity, this thing will play a note back in 32 different degrees of intensity. So there's not much else I can tell you about this other than enjoy. City Opera House is today, and I believe is a Murdoch Sponge Shop, which is where the bar used to be. The tile floor, the brass rail, and the bar actually came from the Murdoch Saloon. The chandelier and the sconces and the wall number did not. They came from the Parkland Hotel in New York. It's a very expensive hotel. They were originally made in Italy for them. You have a picture of the three bartenders at the back of the wall there. The tall guy in the middle, his name was Johnny Blackham. Johnny was the head bartender for the Murdoch Saloon for many, many years until 1919, when Johnny quit tending bar and became Traverse City's chief of police. 1917. So it's 4 years older than our first one. And against me of the quarter sawn oak, it gives it a very distinctive grade. A little fancier stained glass than our first one. We still have the lights behind, so you might have put money to see the thing light up. And it also has the mandolin rail we talked about with our first one. And they added 28 organ flute pipes in this thing that you're going to be able to hear if you play this thing.
Wow.
Now, we talked about the rewinding problem, where those rolls aren't lined up perfectly straight. This music roll is 300 feet long, length of a football field. And if you were to cut this paper and pull it all out, it would go from our front door almost all the way to 31. Please don't do that.
Oh, wow.
Now it all starts over on the left-hand side. The paper gets pulled across the top. It goes through some rollers. There's a brass plate that lays on the top of it, helps flatten it out. Comes down, gets read by the tracker bar here, goes through some pressure rollers where it gets spit back out in the pile. Now it never creases, never folds the same way twice. It's wider than it's tall, so it can't turn and twist on itself. Then to help things along, yeah, I can find one. Then these little metal fingers on a conveyor belt. And they very slowly keep pushing all this mess. Then we got one here, 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 and there. And they very slowly keep pushing all this mess down to the left, make room for more on the right, so I'm going to pull across the top from the left. This is called their KT Nickelodeon. Now, what's the first thing you see on this that's different?
The box. Keyboard.
Keyboard. Bingo. 1925, after the First World War, money was tight for everybody, including companies making these things. And they noticed their observation, even though everyone with a keyboard, you could sit down and play like a regular piano, nobody's actually doing that. They were just putting the money in these things and listening to them being played. Now, since nobody's using these things as a piano, they're made of ivory. They were expensive. If nobody's going to use them, I can save a ton of money and not put one on there, so eliminating the keyboard. And next, 1925 was the beginning of jukeboxes. And there was a serious competition going on between the Nickelodeons and the jukeboxes. And the jukeboxes were winning for two big reasons. The first one being choice. With the jukebox, you could choose the song you wanted to listen to, whereas with the Nickelodeon, you're stuck with whatever the next song happens to be on the music roll. So there was choice, and there's also, probably the biggest reason, is with a jukebox you could get voices and singing that you're never going to get out of a Nickelodeon. Telephone getting hit, and that's kind of neat. Violano-Virtuoso, made by the Milton Company in 1925. Now, this instrument is very unique to everything else we have in the museum because all our other instruments work on pneumatics, which means they're either having a positive pressure to blow air into organ pipes or a vacuum pressure to read the music roll and play the piano and the mandolin reel. There's no pneumatics involved in this thing at all. This is all electric, which is why it was designated by the U.S. government as one of the 8 greatest inventions of the decade. Now, I said this one was made in 1925, but the very first Violano-Virtuoso was made in 1909. So the decade they're talking about is 1900 to 1910. And just like a regular violin bow, these little wheels have to have rosin on them, so there's 2 little rosin pads up here on top. And when the roll rewinds, an electronic magnet pushes this down on the spinning wheels and puts more rosin on them so they'll keep playing. Now, on a regular violin, you have to push your fingers down on the strings to get the higher notes. That, I told you, was the oldest piece you're going to hear on the tour. This happens to be the newest piece you're going to hear, simply because the music house could not find one of these things to rebuild or restore. So in the year 2000, we contacted the Raffen Organ Company, Urbel, Germany, and asked them to please make us a replica of one that was made and played in the streets of Europe in the late 1800s. They said they'd be glad to for $10,000. Well, we had to pay to get this replica made. Now, I'm sure the original instruments didn't cost nearly that much money, and nobody could afford to buy them and play them in the streets of Europe back then. It has 100 organ pipes in it. They're controlled by these 5 stops on the side, so there's 20 pipes per stop. I can turn them on and off, and it sounds like this. for the Wildwood Amusement Park in Cape May, New Jersey, which unfortunately no longer exists after Hurricane Sandy came through and wiped everything out. Now this thing sat outside. It was on top of a pavilion. It had a roof over it, so it's partially protected from the elements. But its purpose in life was to get your attention up to a quarter mile away. When we play this thing, it's going to be a little loud side. We're not going to blow anybody's eardrums out, but it is a little loud. And I'm going to guess that probably about half the people here today are old enough to remember what an IBM punch card was and how it worked. Guess where IBM got the idea from? Right here. So we can actually thank every computer that we have today on these antique music machines, because that's where IBM got the idea for the punch cards. So their binary system, wherever you see a hole, would be a 1 or on, and wherever there's cardboard, it would be a 0 or off. Exactly like an IBM punch card. They also use similar books in loom so they could copy patterns exactly. You get about 1 inch per minute, so you're going to get about just a little over 2 inches of 2 minutes of the song on here. Now this one happens to be Jingle Bells. I just happened to pick that up. We're not going to play Jingle Bells because were made for the sole purpose of accompanying a silent movie. It's the only other reason they ever existed was to accompany silent movies, because guess what? Silent movies were never meant to be silent. Now when they first came out, they showed them in the big cities like New York at Radio City Music Hall, where you could very easily seat 4,000 or 5,000 people. And they would have a 30 or 40 person orchestra that would play to accompany the silent movie. Now, that's great for the big cities, because someplace like Traverse City, where you can only seat 400 people in your movie house, they didn't have the room or the money to pay a 30 or 40 person orchestra. So they would have just somebody play a little upright piano to accompany the movie. Now these silent movies did not come with music. So it was totally up to the organist or the piano player to play something appropriate to match what was going on the screen. So you really had to be good to be a theater organist back then. Theater organs have to try to match what's going on the screen. So we have sound effects that church organs do not have or need. So we have things like a police whistle, a siren. Now, you might be able to find some ministers or priests that wish they had one of these on their church organ. If they catch somebody nodding off during the sermon, you can just point to the organist and go, I've never been to a church that did that. We also have train whistles, a 1924 car horn, a fire gong to wake the firemen up in the middle of the night, a Chinese gong for whatever we need a Chinese gong for, a steamboat whistle, horse hooves. In the springtime, you have to have Tweety Bird. Telephones used to sound this before they came out with cell phones and ringtones. I'll admit that I remember those. A doorbell, sleigh bells. You guys over there, sleigh bells, you have one in your head. A regular bell, snare drum, wood block, cymbal, and a cowbell. Now lucky for us, we do have something that's not original hooked up to this organ, which is a computer. And what this computer can do is it can remember everything that an organist does. And I can tell the computer to tell the organ to do it again. This is not a recording, the organ is actually going to play. Has anybody seen this movie before? It's something of a banana peel trick. Europeans were going to dance halls. Almost every city had a dance hall or two.
They also have on display here, behind glass, various instruments, early phonographs, very early amplifiers like that. Large record players and a collection of jukeboxes. This looks like an original early jukebox. And these are the more modern jukeboxes. Wow. Wurlitzer. Yeah, I've seen a lot of those in a lot of places. But these, not so much. And here's a really modern one. These compared to the others, 1951. And they do have a lot of these. Huge record players, a lot more with the amplifiers. Collection of old radios. Some small and some big. All sorts of things here. And they have a collection of organs. And look at this. A recreation of downtown Traverse City. If you want to read about it there. Somebody took the time to build all these miniature buildings. Well folks, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a really different type of museum. Definitely worth seeing if you're in the area here. Good day folks.